Welcome, everybody, to Starfinder Developer Diary. I am your host, Jason Tondro, and I am welcomed by the extraordinarily talented Jenny Jarzabski. Thank you so much for coming.
No problem.
Jenny, I asked you to come on the show because you wrote the current Starfinder adventure path, Waking the Worldseed. We have art for that. I will show that real quick. This is the first. This is the first volume of the Devastation arc, which is our first high-level AP. Mm-hmm. So you are the first author to write an adventure for characters above 12th level.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I wanted to read before we get into the adventure, and I kind of want to just rewind a little bit, and I want to find out. I want to learn about you. Like our listeners probably may not know a lot about you and about your background. What do you do for a day job? Where you're in the East Coast, I think, are you?
I am currently, yes. I'm from Texas, born and raised. Been up here in New York State for about almost 2 years now.
Okay. All right. So how did you get into the Ttrpg business?
So I originally went to college, majored in English, which I changed my major a few times. My parents weren't incredibly happy that that's what I chose. I always thought I wanted to do some writing and be a writer, but I thought, okay, your only paths are you can be a creative writer, so a novelist, or you could be maybe a journalist, and both of those are incredibly difficult professions to get into. As a novelist, you have to be talented, but you also, in some ways, you have to be lucky. You have to be, right place, right time, all of that. And I wasn't prepared when I graduated for trying to go into journalism. So I actually started teaching. I was a first grade teacher for 5 years in the classroom, loved the kids, was not the biggest fan of some admin and, education program things there. So it's funny because I had actually... So growing up, I always was the weird kid who would walk around by myself, tell stories. Finally, some other weird kids joined me and said, what's your story about? And I started proto GMing for these kids, coming up with scenarios. And that turned into a little bit of role play without rules. Yeah. But I didn't get into TTRPGs until after college, when a friend of mine said, you should come join our game. And from there, I was hooked.
What game was that?
So actually the first game we ran was, it was Carrion Crown, actually, for Pathfinder.
Yeah.
That AP was, I think that was the first one I ever really played. And a few sessions in, the husband of the woman who was the GM told me, hey, I go to this thing called Pathfinder Society. You should come.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I end up almost every single weekend at Pathfinder Society. I started going to local cons. I started GMing. Before long, I found myself at Gen Con doing the crazy 8-slot volunteer weekend, losing my voice, having an amazing time, but just being completely overwhelmed. And I found myself sitting next to a gentleman who worked for Paizo, and who I didn't know. And we ended up having a nice conversation. And he'd asked, I told him I used to love writing, and, I've always dabbled in it. And he's like, well, have you ever thought about writing for tabletops? And no, I haven't. That's a job. People get paid for that. Yeah. What? And it turned out that I was sitting next to Owen Casey Stevens, and I had no idea who that was.
Now I want to call out Owen for a minute here. Because I had no idea that he factored into your on-ramping story.
He did, yeah.
That makes absolute perfect sense and is totally on brand for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have never met a man more supportive, more of a mentor figure. I mean, Chris Sims helped kind of guide me into my current position, but Owen was 100% of the time you can do this. Why don't you have a Patreon? Why aren't you doing all this stuff on your own? And you totally can do it. So that does not surprise me at all that he was there to give you that advice. That's
Yeah, definitely. So he gave me some advice, and he gave me his business card, told me to reach out to him, and I did. So I did a few little projects with Rogue Genius Games, and around that time, Paizo actually was hiring for a developer position, and I talked to Owen. This was something he and I talked about a lot, and I said, I don't think I'm qualified for this, but what should I would love to do that. That would be a dream job. He's like, apply for it. Like, let them tell you you're not qualified. Oh, okay. So I apply. They told me I wasn't qualified, but at the time it was Wes Schneider who was in charge, like the creative director, and he sent me a letter saying, "I loved your writing sample, though. Would you be interested in freelancing for us?" And I said, "Heck yeah."
Yeah.
So it was kind of a confluence of two factors. I feel like Owen was a really good mentor. He got me a little bit of like a little stuff to chew on to get started. And then I took this crazy chance and it ended up benefiting me, even though I did not get the position. And, here I am like 6 years later writing a lot for Paizo. So.
Okay, well, that's really instructive because I want to look at a few different parts of that then. So I see first where you got into the Pathfinder Society, like you became part of the community first. And that's how you not only learned the game, but then by coming to Gen Con, you started to network with the people that make
Correct.
the game. Okay. And then from there, Owen approached you and he gave you an opportunity to do third-party stuff for Rogue Genius. And that let you build up a list of credits. Right?
Yes.
And then you had not written for Paizo officially at all before you applied for that developer gig.
No, the only thing I actually can't even remember. It's been a while. If either the first thing I did for Owen, I think that had maybe just been released, or I was in the process of writing it. Like he was doing his edits and getting it ready. So I was essentially a nobody. Like, I mean, I had no credits, nothing of that nature. And so, but that was a way for them. I got eyes on my work because I sent in a writing sample, and it was this little stat block that I did for this, like, I still kind of remember it. I look back and I'm like, that's cute. Like I could do so much better now. But it was this little girl who had like anti-magic abilities, and she had a little construct, and they wandered the mana wastes together. And I went on about the setting tie-in, and I guess they liked what they saw. And I did a few after that. They invited me to do just a couple of back matter pieces. I did some stuff for like some APs. And then that escalated because, becoming like showing that I could do what they thought I could do, meeting deadlines, being dependable, communicating, all of that got me to where I was writing articles in books and getting bigger chunks of things. And then finally I was given a chance to do what I really wanted, which was a quest for Pathfinder Society, because what I love is adventure writing. If you can't tell, like I've been pretty heavy. I've been doing a lot of it lately in like the last 2 years, but yeah, so it was a process, but I definitely, like what you were saying, anyone who's listening who wants to get into the industry, it really is. Networking is so important. And I feel for people because right now with COVID, we're not able to go to those spaces currently. But there are ways, like there have been open calls on Twitter. I know I saw like Logan Bonner did one a few weeks ago. Always jump on that whenever you have the chance. Like reach out to these people. Like if you follow, I've had all these random people follow me on Twitter, probably because they see like game designer, freelance game designer or whatever. Just feel free, like as long as you're respectful, message those people, say hi, interact with them, be like, hey, can I ask you a question? Worst they're going to do is say, no, I don't have time to talk to you. So that's a way I feel like that's a way you can network while you're still social distancing. But when that ends, go to cons, go to PFS, SFS, like meet the community, meet people and try to talk to them.
It reminds me a little bit of the comic book industry in the sense that a lot of people that started off by writing into comics, and they would be printed in the letter column every month, ended up because they would know the editors, right? Like the editors would know them by name. And so Kurt Busiek, who ends up writing, Avengers for years, starts off as a letter writer, just writing into month. Anyway, and a lot of people have done this, but so and now the networking aspect, I want to acknowledge that this is really problematic even without COVID. Like not everybody can travel.
Absolutely.
And also a lot of networking takes place at like restaurants and bars and like that kind of drinking atmosphere.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people don't want to be a part of. I've never really been comfortable at bars. If everybody goes to the bar to hang out after the con, I like usually go get a pizza, go back to my room at the hotel and read all the 6 books I bought that day, right? Like
right.
That's my post. so that not everybody's really good at that, and that's a challenge. And I don't want to defend that aspect of the industry.
Mhm.
I wish that there was easier for people to get in. So
I agree.
I want to focus on this idea that you wrote for Rogue Genius and you wrote for these third party. I want to encourage people to do this. You 20 years ago, it was really hard to publish in the gaming industry unless you had a publisher that you were writing to, but now all those gatekeepers are gone. And if you wanted to write Pathfinder adventure, you could just write a Pathfinder adventure.
Yeah.
You could put it up on Drive-Thru-RPG in a weekend, I mean, you have to do layout and all that shit, but
yeah, that's a little bit more, but exactly. And you can even just, if you look at people that I know and that I follow and respect, like Clinton Boomer. I mean, he just posts his little like murder hobo party, his little stories, he puts that on Twitter and Facebook and people love it. There's a book of it now, like with art. He's putting it out there, and he's actually another person who kind of helped me early on with this idea of, okay, I just want to bring this up because you're talking about third parties and getting your name out there. He told me that he felt like as a writer, because I had talked with him about, he has written a novel. He's done a lot for Pathfinder. He hasn't really dabbled in Starfinder, but he still does some third party stuff. He had told me that he felt like the golden age of there's like the golden age of writing is here. And yet at the same time, it's also gone, because if you wanted to be a New York Times bestseller who made money like Stephen King, that golden age was in the 80s. But nowadays, you can get your stuff written. Like if you just put something on social media or on a blog, you will have eyes on it. You may not make revenue from it outright, but and again, I hate to tell people to like do things for exposure, because that is also problematic, of like the idea that getting paid in exposure, and that can be exploitative. But I feel like if you have a platform or someone who's willing to share a platform with you, it can be a great way to just put these things out there and see what sticks, and just learn. And that's something that Clinton and Owen have always encouraged me and other freelancers to do, just to do it. Like, don't wait for an opportunity, just do it, and you'll learn, and you'll get your name out there. You never know who's watching.
That's right. And it doesn't matter how many copies these things sell. Like one of my books, Arthur Lives, of RPG I wrote, I don't know, maybe sold 100 copies, but but it's the lesson, it's the friends you make along the way, right?
Well, exactly.
You learn all the process that goes into making the RPG, and that lesson is what people are hiring you for. They're not hiring you for the sales numbers. They've got executives to figure that shit out.
It's not the creatives. Like that's not our wheelhouse there. I mean, the people who do that I respect. Like there are some who have to do everything, but yeah, just I agree. You should always just be taking chances, get your stuff out there. And that can also take the place of networking. If you don't have the ability to get to these cons, or if you're at the cons, you don't feel like you're safe or comfortable in the spaces that the wheeling and dealing happens, because that is absolutely a problem. That is something that I feel like we need to work on, like freelancers as well as staff of these companies. But I don't know what the answer is, but we can, as much as possible, I feel like we should try to keep making people feel comfortable. And
I totally agree. And it's not one answer, right? It's going to be a lot of different things all working together. Logan's open call for Pathfinder authors got 400 responses.
It's a lot. That's awesome, though.
Every one of them, right? And what nobody has, what then inside what that turned into is a spreadsheet of new freelance talent that Logan assembled from those submissions, from those people, with all of their interests and their particular fields of specialization, right? So if they were like writing from a position of a minority voice or a diverse voice, somebody that's been a culture maybe that Pathfinder wants to make new monsters for, right? Or like that. And so it resulted in this huge resource that now, as a Starfinder developer, I can go to that spreadsheet and I can find new people that I've never even heard of before, right? Carrie has shown up, one of our regular watchers, friend of the pod.
Oh,
Well,
hi.
can you see that note from her? I don't know, Jenny, if you can see that.
I can't. Hold on. Where am I? Oh, I can see it now.
Good.
Hi.
Okay. There you go. Yeah. And I wanted to also touch on your education. You were an English major.
Mm-hmm.
Where'd you go to school?
So I went to school again, like as I said, I'm from Texas, born and raised, and I went to Texas A&M University. And it's kind of it's funny because I'm always, well, not so much now that I've moved, but I was always the butt of the Aggie jokes. Like, but I went to A&M. I got my bachelor's in English there. And then after I came out, I did a alternate certification to become a teacher, since I was not an education major, right, but I had started substitute teaching, and I decided this is something I would like to explore and I would like to do. And that took maybe a year. That was distance learning. It was it wasn't, honestly, teaching is more about like in the classroom experience. Yeah. There's only so much you can learn. I mean, yes, you can understand things like child development and psychology, but being in the classroom is a completely different animal. So
you and I had very similar career paths for a while.
Oh, really? Oh, you started in education as well, right?
That's right. Like I was an English major and in college, and then I became a substitute English teacher, and then but when you went right into gaming, I ended up going to grad school.
Okay, right.
And I had the student loans to prove. So I'm not saying I'm not urging that particular path to anyone, but I do want to note that I guess I want to kind of English degrees unite here.
Yes.
The English, a lot of people think of it as a degree to learn how to teach, or they think it's all about grammar. But of course, there's a lot more to it, right?
Absolutely.
Because all that literature and everything that we're reading, and we're learning how to communicate, and we're learning all kinds of things like characterization and theme and dialogue, and we're learning how to write. Mm-hmm. And anybody who wants to go into a creative field, an English degree is fantastic preparation for that. I mean, I remember reading an interview with a guy that created EverQuest. I don't even remember his name anymore. But somebody asked him, like, what kind of education do you recommend? And he said, a liberal arts education, get an English degree. You can learn the tech stuff, but the English degree is going to teach you theme and setting and character and all that stuff.
Absolutely. And another thing, literary criticism, and also just thinking about these themes and thinking about how literature interplays with our society as a whole, and looking for things like bias and all of these things that you don't really think. It's like we don't always think about when we pick up a book that we want to read or watch a show, but it's because of that education, I feel like, and because of some of the friends and mentors that I had in college, I feel like I've always been that person that like questions things and wants to not analyze to the point of, okay, we can't enjoy this anymore, but it's, and we can enjoy problematic media. Absolutely. But I feel like I'm always like, I learned in college how to be aware of things and how to talk to people and to listen to other perspectives and know when it's time for me to step back and let another voice be heard. So absolutely. And, the skills you learn there also work, for writing and editing and all these things that you might use in RPGs.
You've touched on a really important point. The humanities, a degree, whether you're talking about English or history or art or theater, is ultimately an education about empathy. It's an education about learning what other people's experiences are like, and how much you have in common or how much you are different, and how those different perspectives have value and merit. And yeah, you're absolutely right. And as we try to make gaming better, I'm on the record at Paizo as saying that I think that we can write games that mean something. That aren't just, a dungeon crawl to kill monsters and take their stuff, right? That the adventure is actually trying to have some kind of point, that we're trying to say it's a commentary on society, right? And anyway, so I agree with you, and I'm so grateful to have you adding that experience and that education, that background that you have to the Pathfinder and Starfinder lines.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to do it. And
all right. So how did you get onto Devastation, Ark?
Okay. So I had worked with Jason previously. I had done a couple of you know, Pathfinder and Starfinder Society adventures, little scenarios already. I I did already do. He had me write the second volume of Signal of Screams, the Penumbra Protocol.
So this is not the first Starfinder adventure path.
No, this is my second Starfinder adventure path volume. So I guess he thought of me because this scenario or this adventure does have some horror elements to it, and he knows that I'm in, I guess he, I don't know if this is why he chose me, but he knows that I'm interested in that. I had also done some higher level SFS scenarios. I mean, when I say high level, I mean like 7 to 10. I mean 7 to 10, not past 10. Right. So I guess it was just kind of a natural, okay, well, she likes these kinds of themes. She's had experience with, maybe not just low level combat. Yeah. So I guess that's how Jason asked me and I said yes. I was like, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
So
I'm interested in Penumbra Protocol because we haven't really got a chance to talk about that yet. I love that adventure.
I'm glad.
I had forgotten that you had written it. You just mentioned it.
Yeah.
Keely was your developer on that as well?
Yes.
And what, so how did that go? Like, what was the experience writing that?
That was good. It's like, I'm trying to remember that because it's been a couple of years now, I guess, but
yeah, it's funny. People outside the company forget how long it takes us to put it out. And
even this, I realized I turned this in about 11 months ago, the Devastation arc, my volume. And I'm like, it's a little fresh in my mind because I just wrote the little short fiction piece for the blog. But other than that, I'm thinking, I haven't thought about this in almost a year. Like, I better look through the manuscript again so we can talk.
Let's take your let's take your hint and do that. We'll give you a pass on Penumbra Protocol for today because I would
sounds good
about a book you wrote 3 years ago. But this is the art, I think, for the story that you just mentioned that you wrote.
Mm-hmm. It is Ruins in the Ice, I believe, is what we called it.
Ruins in the Ice. And it's a kind of prologue to the adventure.
It is, and it actually, my thought, this is something that Mark Moreland and Keely approached me about, wanting me to write, because I had written the volume. So, Keely said, you and I know this, what's in this volume better than anyone else. So, it would make sense if you wrote it. But he wanted it to be an intro, a prologue, and his original thought was, okay, let's follow the and again, slight spoilers may follow at this point. So these xenoarchaeologists who are down under Jeterat, who were contracted by Abadar Corp to go down and like just look through these ruins and accidentally set things into motion.
Is a moon.
It is a frozen wasteland planet. It is a smaller planet, but it is a planet in its own right. Okay. It is far out in the vast.
Okay.
And the ancient site of, some civ activity. It was a base and a kind of a factory for them, which no one in the Pact worlds knows. But his idea was to talk about these xenoarchaeologists because they are NPCs that are named and have little blurbs about them in the AP, and he wanted it to be like, okay, maybe we could have it be they're exploring the ruins, like what actually happened from their point of view. And I liked that. But one thing I did that was kind of my idea, but I think it worked well, was having it go right up to basically the briefing. Like, it ties in almost to the briefing that your contact, if you are a player, your contact gives you, like, hey, so these people are stuck down there. We just got these emergency messages from them. And it goes right up to that point. So I feel like it gets players like primed and ready to dig in. Yeah. So I hope that was successful. It seems like people enjoyed it, but
like that cut scene from Aliens, right? When the when the family goes out on the LV-426 and Dad comes with the face hugger on him. Yeah.
Yes, that's kind of what I was going for, is that idea of like, okay, here's these people just walking up, just a normal day on the job. Like, oh no, we woke up the alien ruins. Like, please, someone come save us. Luckily, they had a better fate than some of those family members. But
you got Mustafa, and I see the android. Is that a breath? What's the third guy there?
She is a Corlu. So like the little snail
Yeah,
person.
the snail people. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. So please check out this. We'll put up a link to it in the notes for the show. It's up on the Paizo blog, and it's an introduction to the Devastation arc. Last time when I had Keely on, we talked a little bit about the debate over how the Devastation arc kind of came to be. It's been a couple of years that the game has been around now, and we didn't have any high-level support for it. Partly that's because Starfinder adventure paths are just shorter, and the books are shorter. There are fewer pages. Yeah. And so we didn't have enough room in a 6-volume path to get all the way to level 20. And society play doesn't go that high.
No.
But that's a shame. Like we want to support high level play, and we've got a whole third of the game that we don't have any adventures for. So that, we gotta fix that. And once we had enough adventures out, we kind of felt like we could. Traditionally, high level adventures are a harder sell to the executive. We have to, because the argument goes, well, fewer people will buy it. Most games never get beyond 6th level. So the higher level that you go, fewer people play the adventure. And so there's less likelihood. But Paizo has a subscription model, and that gives us a little bit different approach to things. Like, well, people are in for the long haul, and they'll stick with a 3 adventure path, especially if it's high level, because it's the first of its kind, and let's see what that looks like. Let's have this cool adventure. All right. Anyway, so your adventure is kind of the mysterious kickoff. Is that right?
Oh yeah, that's a fair assessment of it for sure.
So what was the outline like that you got from Keely? Was it very detailed? What were there spots where he was like, I don't really know what to do here, just kind of solve this problem, or did you feel like you had a lot of leeway, or did you have a very strict kind of plan already given to you?
So, and I wish I had saved. I probably have that document somewhere on my computer, actually. But to spare you, I archive most things. But if I remember, if memory serves, it was fairly typical of an outline. Where I feel like the outlines I've gotten in later years have been slightly less, if not less structured. Well, they're structured, but maybe less fleshed out, or they'll say like, well, here's suggestions, but certainly feel free. And I feel like as a freelancer, you need to understand that after that first outline, when you turn in an expanded outline, that is where you have room to tweak things, and you can play and talk to the developer. And I always put word comments on, like, comments in the margins on everything. But I'll say like, okay, well, you suggested this monster, but I think this would be better, because of this. And that's a great time to do it, because they will tell you whether or not they like that before you start writing the meat.
Yeah. So just to rewind a little bit to explain to people that may not know.
Sure.
When the freelancer gets the outline, there's basically 3 steps that follow. First, the freelancer, after maybe a couple of weeks to a month, pitches their outline, which is an expanded version of the outline they were given. But normally everybody does these differently. Like, we don't really have guidelines on this, but in theory, the outline includes all of the encounters and the mechanical kind of XP, like how much XP in every encounter, what the monsters will be, what the treasure will be, all that kind of nuts and bolts. But it's not fleshed out. Like, it doesn't have detail. It's just kind of like, okay, here's a list of encounters. Here's the stuff that's going to happen. Is that what your outline is like? What are your outlines like?
So yeah, and I actually decided to just look this up real quick. But basically, so yeah, how my outlines, like what I get is, it's basically like for an AP, it'll tell you, like, you'll have this big chunk of like background info, like this is what everyone needs to know, like for the whole thing. And then for your volume, it'll typically have, okay, so this is the location, this is the background, I'm thinking like, first they do, so it might say something like the PCs need a reason to be here, so you need this, and referencing this one, the PCs need a reason to be here, so you need to write some tie-ins from the past APs. And then he listed, like, which ones. That was actually one of my favorite parts. That was cool. Yeah, those I like that. But he's like, okay, so you need to write that. Then they go to this moon, or you know what? I think it might be a moon. I feel bad that I don't remember. But you go to this celestial body called Jeterat. You go to this rock in space.
All of that.
Yes. And basically, the things that were set in stone is there's these ancient ruins under there, and they have woken up somehow. There is a team trapped beneath that the players need to save. So they kind of, there weren't encounters provided for me. It was more like situations of, we need to include this situation. Then we want to see a starship combat here. Then we want to see this, they need to go to this place. So I really felt like I had a lot of room for like hazards, monsters, theming, and making up these, all I was told is xenoarchaeologists. I was able to create those characters.
Good. Yes.
So, I did feel like I had a lot of control. It was more like, I need you to get them from, point A to point B and point C. And don't forget starship combat, that kind of thing.
Right.
And he certainly had suggestions, and I did take some of them, but some of them I did not take. And I believe those ended up in the back matter as like separate monsters, that's cool.
Oh yeah. So then after the freelancer gives the outline, which is an expanded version, then you're free to work on what we call the milestone, which is really just a check-in point where, maybe you're working for a month or so, you're about halfway done maybe with the project. Show us where you're at, and then we can make any kind of course corrections. Yeah. And this has been really invaluable for me. I remember when I submitted a milestone to Chris once, and I completely misinterpreted what my instructions were on one of these things. And I had thought that it was like a players go, this was for a threefold conspiracy. And I thought that the players had to like travel to the gray flying saucer and like find the grays in it and like confront them, and they fled. He meant that to be a starship combat, right? Where the players fight the gray starship. And I was like, oh, well, I'm glad we caught that now, because I had this whole cinematic sequence of the players putting on jetpacks, like flying through space to get to the gray flying saucer. Anyway,
that's funny.
So you did the outline now, but I guess what I was getting at is how detailed are the outlines that you send back to the developer? Do you have all the XP and treasure and stuff figured out, or is that
not for me? And I'm sure everyone's different. For me, what I do is my big things are for me, it's very important to have the encounters mapped out. So I will have like the number of encounters, and I go ahead and start formatting then, because it helps me. That's something I've started in later years of freelancing, but I will put in all the encounters. So it's important for the, I'll show, I may not have all for an expanded outline, I probably won't have original monsters statted out yet, but I will call out, this is going to be an original creature. And this is just kind of a blurb about it. Like it's if I want to make a new daemon, which I did, but like, if you want to make a new daemon versus, I want to make a fungus person that shapeshifts, or I want to make like a little snail that talks or something, like I'll say that. And I'll also call out all the sources of any pre-existing creatures that I use.
Good.
So for me, it's very much like, it's fairly bare bones, but any kind of encounter, like any trap, hazard, like a role play kind of thing, that will all be a skeleton, like mapped out on my page. And that way that a developer can tell me that's way too many combats, or that's not enough, or and I'll have the XP figured out, but I won't have the treasure. I don't do until that is actually the last thing I do, because I'm not the biggest fan of adding treasure into scenarios. I don't really like it, but so I always save it for the end. It's my dirty secret.
Well, first off, I want to note that I approach adventure writing the way I was trained in grad school, which is do the thing that I'm most worried about, that I feel the most anxiety about at first. So, which changes from adventure to adventure. So like the first one I wrote was Dawn of Flame 18. And I had never written a Starfinder adventure path before. And so I was really kind of worried about all the mechanics of like making up all the bad guys and stuff like that. So I I made up all the stat blocks for all the monsters, and all of that shit was in my outline.
Yeah.
But by the time I wrote my next one, well, I knew I could do that. That was not a big deal. So instead, I focused on like story and like, you know, some of the if the players do this, then this happens, like that sort of branching choice option, you know, prediction game that you play sometimes with PCs. But I agree with you about treasure. But I want to go back. I want to ask you more about that. Why do you hate allocating treasure?
I think I don't like it because it is kind of just straight up math. It's not that I can't do math or anything. It's just that I don't know. And I feel like with treasure, there's some cool items out there for sure, but it's so much. It's like I always want to make sure that I get into this thing where I think to myself, I want this to be as thematic as possible, and it can't always be. Like if there's going to be an encounter with something that could do negative like levels or something later, I want to have like, oh, I don't know, and I'm thinking more Pathfinder here, but like a scroll of restoration or something. Like I would seed things that might help later. Your
classic dungeon design.
Oh, exactly. And it's like I learned that from, you know, the best, like just playing and reading through these things.
Right.
So there's that. But I also, like, for instance, you're on an icy planet. It would be really cool for the boss you fight to have like an ice weapon. I don't know. It's thematic. So I feel like I have to go through like all of these, like, you know, all the books, and I have to sit here and worry over the math. And I'll always inevitably like under assign the first time and like, damn it, like back to the drawing board. And then I over assign. And so it's not hard. It's just, it's tedious.
It's tedious. Yeah. It's not difficult. It's just not very fun.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And we make this hard too, because we put double the normal treasure in.
Yeah. And at least we have numbers to go with. But then there's the whole like, well, you know, significant items, you know, that they'll probably use as upgrades. You could just split that, you know, that across 4 people in the party. But if it's just kind of lower level stuff, you know, they're going to sell it back for 10% of its value, and then you divide that by 4, and it's like, oh my god, just all the formula. And I've made spreadsheets, but it still is just very tedious.
And I want to highlight one thing that you mentioned, which is the fact that your experience of knowing what to put as treasure in the adventure is informed by playing.
Yes,
you were talking about,
absolutely.
Like, you played these games, and you know that, oh, it's really great if we find something that we can actually use in the adventure later on. I cannot stress the importance of actually playing the game or run the game when you want to write for the game.
Yes.
And I get all the obstacles. Like, believe me, and it's got even worse in the last 6 months, right? Like we can't sit down with a table with our friends and just play a game like we want to. And we often don't have enough time to actually play test the adventure that we're writing. Because you had like a very short deadline on this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And with Starfinder, Society is even worse. It's typically like a month, maybe. I mean, I think I had about almost 2 months on this, but when you consider that this was like the final turnover is like 30,000 words, and for, you know, they are shorter. The Pathfinder AP volumes are closer to 40 without articles, but it's still a lot.
The Devastation arc is longer than a regular adventure path in Starfinder. We cut. Normally, the adventure path have 2 articles in the back, plus an Alien Archive Codex. We cut one of those articles and folded it into the adventure path manuscript. It's because we know that simply because of the way that math works at high level in Starfinder, it just takes more pages.
Yes, absolutely.
The level that we need. Yeah. I think a regular Starfinder adventure path is about 25,000 words in terms of, but yours was closer to 30. Yeah,
it was. Yeah, when I turned it in, I think it was like 29,000, something around that.
And a Pathfinder one is normally 35. So that's kind of split the difference on this one. All right, so listen, I've had this art up at the Christmas tree. Is this Life Day?
Yes and no. This is so no, but it's so this is right before the players would go into the ruins. So what's going on Jetteret that these archaeologists had to go down to the ruins for is that Abadar Corp and a subsidiary company called New Horizons Luxury Retreats decided they wanted to make a holiday, like a winter wonderland, like a holiday village where you can come and stay and have a great time. So this is like their partially completed village. So these workers get in and they're making this like this silly holiday village complete with holograms and animatronics, which that was all me. I'm weird like that. I had to throw my weird horror tropes in and be like, I need animatronics to attack players. Like, it's gonna be great. They're gonna sing while they do it.
Is that your secret fear, is animatronics?
There's actually video footage of me as a 4 or 5-year-old crying and running screaming from a Chuck E. Cheese. So like the mascot, and there were like the animatronics on the stage. So I'm not a fan of them. So I have to I always draw from my own experience and things that like unnerve me when I write things that I want to be horrific or
working through trauma in RPGs. It's a long-standing tradition in this movie.
It definitely is. But so as they're constructing this village, they uncover these strange ruins, and it's just Abadar Corp protocol to send a team down and investigate and make sure that, first of all, there's nothing dangerous down there, and second of all, that there's not living creatures already still here that they're going to like chase out or hurt by, I guess they're at least somewhat enlightened as a company that they would rather not do the space colonialism quite so bad. So that's kind of how it all starts, as those archaeologists go down. But yes, this is that village, like part of the construction that's completed.
It's so perfectly Starfinder that would find a way, that some company would find a way to monetize an ice planet, right? Like how can we make money off the ice planet? And the answer is, well, it's North Pole all year long, right?
Yes. And I never said any specific holiday. It's holiday, but that can be whatever you want it to be.
Well, we have the Christmas tree and what's the Whoville hologram is what that reminds me.
Yeah, those were, I believe they were singing Snowcaster Elves or something like that. So.
All right. Well, so you worked on the Milestone, and the Milestone is the next step of the outline. And as I say, it's really just kind of a check-in. How far along were you? The Milestone is usually about a month in, right? If you had 2 months, it's about a month in. How far did you get in that month? What was it like?
I believe at that point I had a rough draft of probably like 2/3 to 3/4. I try to push myself and get, my ideal is to turn in a rough draft at a Milestone. That is usually not what happens. It's usually not quite completed. But again, I always this is just how I operate. And I think it's because this is something that I have, like what you said, you tackle the thing that you worry about the most first. I typically will tackle all the encounters and mechanical bits first. It's not that I'm not comfortable with them. It's just that, especially at high level, there's just more moving parts. It's a little harder and to get that right and to get that to balance. So I always will have all combats and encounters filled in. There just may be places where there's still some placeholder text, like there's box text and descriptions probably aren't finished at that point, a Milestone.
Now, you touched on this at a high level, and I want to come back to this because I grappled with this a little bit when I wrote Starfinder 18. Now that was the last volume of Dawn of Flame, right? I remember thinking, okay, well, this is a classic base invasion plot, right? You've got like this big base that the Ifrit are living in close to the sun, and the players have to break in and wreck the joint to stop the invasion. But they're 12th level, so they've got access to all kinds of spells and class abilities that could potentially make this either really easy, right? Or just go off the rails completely. And whether it's Arcane Eye, where you can just like scout out the entire base with your clairvoyance, or some kind of mind reading power where you capture somebody and then you just like get all the secret code, from their brain. And I actually went so far as to sort of write a whole little sidebar that was specifically addressing high level challenges for the GM, who maybe had to grapple with those before. The lesson I was always taught, and this is easier to say than it is to do, is rather than saying, okay, no, the players can't use that ability here. Let's stop them from using their teleportation that lets them sidestep all of my cool traps.
Yeah.
Make it so they need those high-level powers to succeed. Right?
Yeah, I like that.
You need to be able to teleport because that shit's going to kill you unless you can teleport.
Right.
How did you approach high-level abilities in this adventure? What were your thoughts on that?
So there is the one place that I can think of that's a good example is when in the very beginning in part 1, in approaching those ruins, and what's going on, again, spoilers, is that there are the ancient civ machinery and computers have woken up, and that they have interfaced with all the terraforming equipment that's on the planet.
Oh, yeah.
And they're causing it to go haywire. And that is how, first of all, the explorers got trapped because they just can't get out. But there's also a blizzard going on in the valley. Good. So the players have to contend with the actual environmental aspects and factors. But the idea that Jason Keeley and I had when we talked about this was, in this case, we didn't feel like there's any way to challenge. It would not be the best if they just teleported right into the ruins. We didn't want them to do that. So it's possible, but there are risks to doing it because you have this very brutal storm going on. So already based on teleportation, there's going to be some complications. And it's like you may not be able to really see where you're going. Also with all the like techno, like Magitech malfunctioning in the area, there is a slighter, a bigger chance of failure than normal for some of these things. Yeah. So we had a sidebar where we talked about, we talked about that, and like, here's the ways that if the players do this, it might work, but it is more risky, and how the GM can let them know, this is going to be a risk. If you still want to take that risk, be my guest, but it may not turn out well. So I feel like in this particular adventure, we approached it more from, okay, we have to realize that they could circumvent this whole part, but if they do, so be it. But are there maybe unexpected consequences to doing that?
Yeah. It's interesting hearing you describe this situation. It reminded me of another thing that you can do in high-level adventures, which is to layer threats. Like you've got like the terraforming equipment, you have the terrible environment situation. Either one of those would be enough for low-level play. But when they're high level, you can just layer all that shit on. Right?
I know.
and figure, well, the players, one of the things, you can't do this so much in an adventure path because you're writing for an audience. But when you're running at your own home game, when people are this high level, the GM doesn't have to solve the problem. You just throw the problem at the players and let them use all of their incredible abilities to find their own solution. Mm-hmm. We kind of have to figure out the solution because the readers would expect the solution to be figured out in an adventure path.
Yeah,
we can't say let your players figure it out. Like that would seem lazy.
Exactly.
In an adventure path, but you can do it at home, which is an interesting difference between writing for a home game and writing for something. Yes. Especially published by Paizo, where the adventure path is really the flagship title company. All right, so you had your milestone, which where are we at? Looks like we're in the Worldseed in this picture.
Yes. So this is the actual Worldseed in the title, down in the corridors.
And I don't know if you guys can see it very well, but these green things are like tubes that look like, I presume that there's something alive inside those tubes.
Yeah, there might just be.
There might be too much. There's something in there.
Something.
What does all this have to do with Bantrids?
And spoilers, I'm assuming, are okay at this point, right? Because anybody here either has played or they are going to play it and they don't mind.
This is the developer diary, so we can talk about all that.
Okay. So this was Keely's idea. This was something this was one of the few things that I was told, this must be so. This is the word of Paizo, like, period. Okay, like, okay, I can do that. So basically the idea is these happy little balls of fun, these little bantrids. Unfortunately, the Moon of Hib is where they're from. If you're familiar with them at all, from, I believe, Pact Worlds is where they were introduced in that book. That they came out of these little towers, and they were just like, hi, and they have no memory of where they're from, who they are, how long they've been down there. They just came out and joined the Pact Worlds. But unfortunately, the dark history of the Bantrid is that they were a servitor species that was controlled by the Civ historically, and they essentially, in the background of this adventure, there's a few factors that all sort of happen. The Civs are trying to fight this unwinnable war against the Kishali, their enemy. Yeah. The Bantrids are finally rebelling and had a pretty successful rebellion on Jeterat. And as a result of all of these things, happened kind of at once. And so the Moon of Hib itself, where the Bantrids came out of, is in fact the Worldseed. It is a generation ship that was meant to take some of the Civ into stasis and into space, and it was commandeered by some of the Bantrid rebels. Okay. But unfortunately, it was not finished, so they weren't able to pilot it. They were just able to put themselves into stasis and kind of wait and hope that they could outlast this evil, that this controlling force that had essentially enslaved them for probably centuries. And now they're free of that. I mean, assuming that our intrepid players can deal with the Civ threat that's coming towards the Pact Worlds towards the end of this adventure path. But
and the Civ and the Kishali, that whole conflict is, of course, the deep background to Dead Sun's adventure path.
Yes,
and the Stellar Degenerator and all that stuff. When Rob and Keely were brainstorming the Devastation arc, and by this point, interestingly, the adventure creation team is really just 3 people. It's really just Rob, the creative director. And then it's the 2 developers that work on the adventures. Well, that was Keely and Chris Sims. But by the time the Devastation arc was being thrown around, Sims was already gone, or he was already gone. I think he had left already. And so instead of 3 people in the room, it was only 2. And it was very interesting for me to be hired into that space, because Keely was desperate for a 3rd voice in that room. Like,
absolutely, yeah.
Better to brainstorming with 3 people.
Gosh, yeah. The more the merrier when it comes to brainstorming, to an extent, because after a while it can be noise. But I can see that.
But when it's just 2 guys, especially 2 people that already know each other so well as Rob and Keely, you start to get to the point where you know what the person's going to say before you even open your mouth, and you can play out. It's like Moriarty versus Holmes in that second movie, right? Like, you plan out the whole battle in your head, and you're like, okay, well, I don't really know how to win this thing. But with 3 people in there, you can kind of have a more open and freewheeling conversation. You actually sort of get some new original ideas in there. But anyway, they weren't really sure what to do, but they both love Bantrids. Like, Keely created the Bantrids, and Rob loves the high-speed roller racing aspect of them. And so as soon as they realized that they had an opportunity to do a Bantrid-themed adventure, right, they were on that like stink on a pig, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, and this is one of the Hib towers.
Yeah, I love that art.
Isn't this great? This looks like it came right out of a Hollywood picture.
I know.
And you can see around the tower this ramp, like a spiral ramp, and that's because the Bantrids, of course, have roller balls on their bottoms. So they don't use stairs. They don't use a stair. They roll up the side or roll down the tower. It's so great. I love it when biology informs architecture.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. So you got feedback on the outline of the milestone, I'm not going to throw stones at Keely. I know we all get really busy sometimes, and so often feedback does not come through as quickly or as detailed as we would all like it to be.
No.
On sides of that. But you got some feedback on both the outline and the milestone.
Yes.
and then you use that to come up with your final draft.
Yes, and that's at that point, if assuming there's nothing, because typically what this is, again, this is also me having just 6 years of experience. There's people more experienced than me, definitely, but I've been doing this for a bit.
Yeah.
At that point, I just kind of keep pushing forward, and if any, usually it's a go ahead, green light, you're good, because the reason I try to put so much detail of encounters into the expanded outline is that way there's not that many surprises in the milestone. That's my goal, because what I would rather happen is just to get a green light on the milestone, like, you look good, just keep going. Maybe a comment of like, oh, don't forget, you talked about this, are you going to include that? Or hey, I have an idea for how you could change this. But I don't like to surprise the developer at all. Right. I want them to know, and especially because I do sometimes do some weird stuff, I like them to be aware that it's coming. Yeah. So he gave me a little bit of feedback, and I took it into consideration. I made changes and just basically finished the draft. My ideal is to finish maybe like at least a couple weeks before it's due, and then to go away from it and just come back a few times for like polishing and edits. Doesn't always work quite that way, but I try to have a draft, and then get to come back and fine tune things. And it's like, if you let us, we'd probably keep writing on these things forever, because you could always think of something to change or to add, or that phrasing could be better. It doesn't sound quite as evocative as I wanted it to, but eventually you have to just like let it go. And
and also it is really hard to let the manuscript go, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge that that's what the developer is for. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, the developer's job is to take your manuscript and make it better, and they're going to see where those transitions aren't as great, or they're going to see that dialogue that maybe is a little flat or sounds a little too boxed texty, right?
Right.
And when everybody works together, that's getting fixed in the development stage, or getting changed. That's not a shame. That's a process working as intended, right?
Oh yeah. Actually, on that note, if I may, so one thing that I actually recently was a fairly big change. Normally, like, I haven't gone through it with a fine tooth comb yet. I occasionally do that just for personal feedback, just to see, maybe if this was changed, why, if this was left out, why. Sure. I've been told sometimes it's truly just layout, and it's just that, they had to cut something, or, this just didn't work. We didn't really like this in the end. It wasn't you, it's just, it didn't work. But, so wouldn't take it personally, but I do like to look. And one thing that was recently changed that was fairly significant was when I did, for Pathfinder, the Extinction Curse Legacy of the Lost God is my Pathfinder AP.
That's fantastic. We are.
Oh, you wrote volume 1. That's right. Didn't you?
That's right.
Yes. Oh, that's right. And I'm actually listening to a podcast going through it right now, and they are amazing. Like, I'm enjoying it, and I can't wait till they get to my volume. They're in yours right now.
Is it D20? What's
Dice Will Roll is the one I'm listening to.
Roll. Yeah.
Oh, I love them so much. So in that, again, spoilers, but in that AP volume, there is this big fight at the end with the circus master of the opposing circus, this Mistress Dusklight, who's been she's just been against them from the beginning. She's been an antagonist. Like, they were in her circus, they broke away, and she's back to darken their doorstep. And I had this idea of this cinematic encounter where they are fighting her in the big top. Like, she has somehow tricked them to come into her circus while she has paying customers in the audience. And they fight against like her lineup of circus stars, and they fight, and the audience has no idea that this is a real fight, because she uses her illusion magic to kind of cover it up and make it look,
it's all like part of the show.
Yeah, and I loved this idea, and I think initially Ron Lundeen was the developer for that. I think he liked it too. Otherwise, I don't think he would have approved it for the milestone and everything. But in the end, he actually did give me some post-publication feedback, which you don't always get, and it is nice when you get it. But I know y'all are busy as devs. But he told me that he did make those changes because the maps are something I am personally working on being stronger at, but he had to make some changes to the mapping I did, and it just kind of, I guess it worked out that it wasn't live. He still kept all the, he kept most of the actual encounters, and it felt like kind of a crawl through like her circus, and you fought her stars, but it wasn't on stage. And I was not upset by that. I read through it and I said, well, my idea was really cool, but I can see how this works better mechanically. So yeah, I mean, sometimes that's going to happen if you're a freelancer and you turn over this manuscript. There may be changes, and it's not bad. It's nothing about you. It's just,
that's right.
Your
developers
are there for.
You're absolutely right, by the way, and that's by the sound of that. That's a classic example of this. Of sometimes the physical limitations of the page, the landscape of the AP, the math, if you will, forces us to make changes that we would otherwise not change. If a map comes back and they forgot to draw the bleachers, well, now it can't be live because I don't have anywhere for the people to sit.
Yeah, exactly.
And so now it can't be live. Now I have to change the whole event, the whole encounter, to fit the map. I remember once when Chris Sims was developing one of the Signal of Screams adventures, and he got a monster in, and the art was basically just a blob made of eyeballs. It was like a floating eyeball blob. This is nothing like the monster he had originally written. He had to redesign the monster because the artist had misinterpreted what the instructions were. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's astonishing how often that happens. Anyway, so you turn in once you turn in the turnover, the final turnover. Mm-hmm. Now, in theory, Paizo can come back to you and ask you for changes, but in practice, you were done.
Yep. And exactly. I've never had that happen. I always say, like, oh, if there's anything I can do for you, any questions, a couple of times, especially as I've developed working relationships with some of the devs over the years, occasionally I'll have someone message me and say, hey, what did you mean by this? Or is this right? Like, am I reading this correct? Like what you meant, but I've never had anyone come to me and ask for changes. And I think that's, I don't know. It seems like some of the other freelancers I know that we've talked a little bit, that seems fairly universal, that in theory Paizo can do it, but typically the developer just, that between them and editing, that they just handle any changes themselves, it seems like.
I do agree with you, though, that the idea of communicating with the freelancer and asking, mm-hmm. I do this a lot. I write to somebody and I say, what were you trying to say here? What was your intent if I can't figure it out?
Right.
Because I want to be true to the author's vision, but I don't know what that vision is, and I don't want to make the wrong call. But yeah, you're right. Often, the common wisdom in the office is usually it's easier and faster to simply change it yourself than to write to the freelancer and ask them to make the change. I also there might. What do you think? Is that?
No, I mean, I don't know because I'm not part of that process, but I can see that, I guess. Yeah. And I have a little bit of a weird perspective because I've actually done some contract developing for Paizo. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but like starting last year, I developed 3 society scenarios for Starfinder, and I also developed a good chunk of ships for Starship Operations Manual. So as a freelancer, I was still a contractor. I'm not, I wasn't like part of the staff, and I didn't have it wasn't quite the same, but it's like, I can see how that would be when I was working on things like, okay, I could just, I should probably just make this change, or I should, I can see how a developer would get into that mindset, but I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying I get it, I guess, from my limited experience.
I think we often feel like sort of this is my job. Like my job is to change.
Mm-hmm.
So, right. Yeah. But and the freelancers also, there also can be that to like, well, the freelancers already done their work. Like they've turned in the words. We're not paying them enough as it is. Like everybody in the developer room, we all want to pay freelancers more.
Yeah.
We could all raise their rates. We would.
Well, we appreciate that as I know all the freelancers. I can speak for everyone. We would love that, but I know there's limitations.
The rate for writing a Starfinder adventure path is 10 cents a word, which is considered to be high in our industry, but it's been 10 cents a word for 10 years, right? Like that shit needs to change. People, that's not enough that's not enough. It's not enough. Well, anyway, and also you have to draw all those maps. Well, we don't pay you anything for the maps. We just pay you by the word. So the maps are basically free. And anything else that you might have to do is essentially over and above the 10 cents a word. Well, so sometimes we feel like that maybe although we have the right to ask you, because that's what it says in the contract, that doesn't mean we don't feel guilty about asking you to do more work on it. Maybe we can address the imbalance there a little bit by not asking you to put in more work that we feel like we can't pay you to do.
That makes sense.
But conversely, if we got to a point where we were paying you more, then we would feel better about asking you to come back and revisit these things too. And time schedule, we normally have about a month, maybe 5 weeks to develop an adventure. We can normally do it in that much time, but it's important to remember that we're developing while we're doing a lot of other things at the same time. So as Keeley was developing your adventure, which is number 31, he might have also been copy fitting 30, right? And developing back matter on some other adventure at the same time, or maybe writing outlines for an adventure yet to come, not to mention all of our usual meetings and all that kind of stuff. So if we only had to do one thing at a time, we could knock that adventure out in a few weeks, but there's always a lot of other things competing for us at the same time. And as the deadline gets closer, we're like, well, let's just do it. But anyway, I'm thinking about my job to you. I apologize.
It's fine. And I'm sure anyone who's listening is interested in that, because I like what you're doing with like developer, the concept of the developer diaries and trying to talk with, it's a side that players don't get to see. And it's even as a freelancer so there's a good argument to be made for, I've seen inside some of these processes, but I'm not a staff member anywhere. I don't own a third party, anything like that. So there's a piece that I never get to see. And when I started doing the contract work, I saw a little bit more into the, look through the peephole a little, but we still don't see everything. So I think it's cool to learn like what all goes into these adventures that we play. And, we all know what goes into making a movie, because there's all the director's cuts and you see all the camera people and like, oh my God, you look at the credits and wow, it takes like 1,000 people to make a movie. Wow. But we don't get this as much with TTRPGs or the game industry in general. So it's cool.
What is next for you? What have you done since this that you can talk about?
Okay, that I can talk about. Well, excuse me. After this, I did, of course, I did the short fiction, which we referenced, and that actually happened after the AP was, turned in for about 9-10 months. Sorry, I just saw one of the comments of you get 10 cents for the is and but. The whole thing goes into the word count. So
it's 10 cents per median word, the average word. Yeah. So you also only get 10 cents for discombobulate. Yes. So.
Yes, you do. So I wrote a couple of Starfinder society scenarios. That's one of my favorite things is I love organized play. I love society. APs are awesome, but I really like the idea of these little pickup games where anybody can just walk in and anywhere in the world you can play, and you don't have to know the storyline. Oh, go on.
That's what's great. I mean, that makes perfect sense, because that's what how you got in with society.
Yes, exactly. So I did a couple of those. I actually had this actually was kind of, I kind of met my career goal, or at least the one that I had as a freelancer. What I always told myself when I first started doing this is I want to write the Gen Con special. Like, if I can write the Gen Con special, I'll have made it. Like, I want that, and I want an AP volume. And of course, I got the AP before I got that, but I got to write the kickoff of season 3 in Starfinder Society with Pact World Warriors, and I highly recommend it if you like my weird, zany, like pop culture references, but twisted to a Starfinder theme. I would play that if you haven't, because it's kind of cool. It's kind of fun. And then I got to introduce this villain Datch, who who was not my creation, but I did get to kind of have the first go with her. So I feel like I did get to put my impression on her a bit as a character. And then of course I wrapped up that storyline with the special 300, which was the last bite. And that just came out at Gen Con Online. Still a little sad I didn't get to walk through the Sagamore and see all the tables playing the game, but it was still really cool. I went into the Discord and listened to some tables, and that was cool. But I've done that. I've done some work for some upcoming books. Actually, the book that the mechs will be in, I can't talk about what it was, but
we named that book. Tech Revolutions. Is the book.
Yes. Okay. So I did some work for Tech Revolution, actually a pretty good sized chunk. So that's, I know, in development as we speak.
Yep, that's right.
And that's, I'm trying to think. That's really it. I've got a couple little things in the works as well, but as far as what I could talk about, that's...
Yeah, because do you write for other companies, or are you mostly just working on Paizo stuff right now?
Mostly Paizo. I do work, so I did, in the beginning, I dabbled in third party. I've done a couple things for Legendary Games. I love Jason Eric Nelson is another great person in the industry. If you're trying to get in to talk to, he's a great guy, and he's very welcoming.
As a note, virtually everybody in the Paizo creative team has written for Legendary at one point or another. I'm
not surprised. Yeah,
there's a lot of connection there. We have a question. What else is in Tech Rev? I can't tell you.
I know, right?
The Tech Revolution book has been announced. We know that it's what we're playtesting both the Nanosite class and the mech rules in. Yeah. But other than those specific elements, I don't believe we're at liberty to talk about Tech Rev.
No, I don't.
Otherwise, but it's called Tech Revolution, so
yeah, just the title can maybe give you a window into themes there. So yeah, I did start doing some stuff for I've done a few little things, and I've worked with Storm Bunny Studios. That's another person named Jason. There's a lot of you around this industry for some reason.
I go by Jake in the office.
I don't blame you. Yeah. So I've done a couple things for them, but lately I've been doing more. I've been trying to not so much break away from game writing, but just spend more time on personal projects like fiction and things like that.
Good,
I like writing fiction. Yeah. I am actually, I can talk about this because this is just me. Skullcon is a small charity convention that is held in the Twin Cities of Minnesota every year. I've done it last several years. And this year I will be running an original adventure that I've written. It's not, the signups aren't up yet. I believe it's the weekend of October 9th. This year, I think. Don't quote me on that, but it's Skullcon, SKAL Con.
Is it virtual or live? Can people?
It's going to be virtual this year.
Okay, so people can play from wherever you live.
Yes, people can sign up and play. And what I am going to be running is, so I am a big fan of the magical girl genre of anime, and I've been joking forever about writing. Like, what if we did magical girls but Starfinder? And this is something Paizo would probably not want to like actually do. So I thought, okay, I'll just do my own thing, like whatever. And so I am going to be running a one shot with pre-gens. It's a 6th level adventure that I'm coming up with, and so that's just kind of my own thing, just for fun, for charity.
Can I play Sailor Agaton?
I should do that. I haven't decided how I'm going to theme the pre-gens yet.
It's got to theme it by the planets of the Pact World. It's got to be like Sailor and Sailor Verses. Like
I may have to use that idea. Actually, I didn't. For some reason, I didn't think about that.
You think that we would not be behind a magical girl AP? Like virtually the entire editorial team would be lined up to play that game.
Oh, I'm sure that would be great. But no, I've been working on that. So that is kind of, again, that's for charity. That is not, I'm not going to publish it. You know, I'm using Paizo's like intellectual property there with all the proper nouns. Like I would never publish it, but it's just for fun and for charity. So I'm trying to. I have unfortunately been on a furlough for a little bit because of COVID. So
yes.
I have been looking at other employment options, but my big thing is just trying to take time for my own projects as well.
Well, this is, I mean, if we're going to find a silver lining in this crappy cloud, right? That's part of it.
Yeah, right.
Well, listen, we have kept you for an hour and a quarter, and that's longer than I should have. But thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to encourage everybody, if you're listening, like there's when will the signups for this Skullcon open up, do you think?
I'm not exactly sure. I know that their website is very basic. It's not a very detailed website by design, but I had spoken to one of the coordinators who said to me that in the next couple of weeks he would get back to me just to make sure I was still up for that. So I would think, I mean, probably sometime in the month of September we'll see that, because it is early October.
Yeah.
So
well, bookmark Skullcon and check it out, and come back and play in Jenny's game, and then tell us how it is. Jenny Jarzabski, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Everybody, good night. We'll see you next time. I'm going to try to bring on Eleanor Farron, talking about magical girl fans, right? Like Eleanor.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah.
That adventure. Anyway, I'll try to have Eleanor on, who picked up when your story left off. And we'll see everybody next time.